Well, again, for a few weeks, we've been talking about relationships. If you haven't been here with us, we've learned a lot about relationships, good, bad, and ugly. But we've probably seen something more than anything about how bitterness kills people, and where forgiveness always sets us free. We saw the pain, what it was to lose a trusted friend. If you remember when Ahithophel, he turned against David and joined his son Absalom. It was Psalm 55 I had read from, and I'll read it again tonight. In Psalm 55, 12 through 14, it captured David's heart in this moment. It said, "For it is not an enemy who reproaches me." He says, "Then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me, who has exalted himself against me. Then I could hide from him. But it was you, a man my equal, my companion, and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together. We walked to the house of God in throng." And David was talking about Ahithophel, his most trusted advisor, the one that he had not only worshiped the Lord alongside, but they went to battle with, and Ahithophel turned against him, and it wounded David so deeply here. And again, it's one of those life lessons. Nobody enjoys learning about friendship, but it's so important for us to experience this side of heaven. You want to know who will stand with you in your darkness, and again, when it's so easily convenient to walk away and to go the way of others. And we see again in Psalm 3, it's another psalm that David wrote that captured his heart, as we saw last week when he was fleeing from his own son. It was Psalm 3, verses 1 through 4, and it said this: "Lord, how they have increased who trouble me." It says, "Many are those who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God, Selah. But you, O Lord, are a shield for me, my glory and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill, Selah." And the crying that David was doing, was not that, just tears, coming down his face. It was that deep weeping from the very depth of his soul. There's probably no greater betrayal than to be betrayed by your own children. And, for David to go through this, there probably wasn't a more darker moment. But here's something that's positive. There's always a silver lining, with the Lord. He always sends along a special friend at just the right moment. And we know that in David's life. If you've studied his life, first and foremost, it was who? It was Jonathan. There was a time when, David was, being pursued by Saul. There was a hatred that existed. And in that midst of that, God sent along Jonathan to be there for him. And Jonathan became his most faithful friend. He said that the love that he enjoyed with Jonathan was even greater than he had known from a woman. And it wasn't that they were gay. What he was talking about was there was nothing to tie them except their soul one to another. There was nothing they were going to get from one another other than what they offered to one another in friendship. And it was something that meant so much to David. And then you have, here, we see Hushai. Here's another guy that comes along at just the right moment, and he's in a place where, Ahithophel is turned against him, again, his most trusted friend. So not only has he lost David, now he's lost his most trusted, advisor. And, and next thing you know, what does God do? He brings along somebody at just the right moment in time. And, it made me think about that tonight. If you think back in your own life, there's probably been moments in your life where it was either a place of darkness or despair, and God sent somebody along at just that right moment. Maybe it was a moment when you were about ready to just give up and quit. Maybe it was, whether it was quitting on a relationship or a marriage or, a job or, whatever the thing was, your own life, just not believing in yourself, or just, in the darkness that comes with life. And then all of a sudden, God brings somebody along, just seeming out of nowhere. And maybe you didn't even recognize it then, but even as I share this tonight, all of a sudden the light comes on and you're going, wow. As I think back, God was so faithful that he sent somebody, we always love that to say, he sent somebody like Jesus, Jesus with skin on is what we like to say. Because we know that Jesus resides in us by spirit, but every once in a while he sends somebody along with skin who is a reflection of him. And what a blessing for me and you to get to be that person. And we should be praying that, Lord, help me to be Jesus with skin on in somebody's darkness, in that moment where they just can't go on, and to have that sensitivity, to be led of the Spirit. for the most part, if we were honest, we're going to go, we're all pretty selfish. We tend to look at the world through our own lens, and we're going about our day. But Jesus was always going about somebody else's day. He says he came to seek and to save that which was lost. Amen. He was always looking out for everybody else. People, well, if you do that, people will take advantage of it. And you go, absolutely. They will. And you go, but there's a blessing in that. And you'll see it as it goes on through the scriptures here. But one of the things that I love about this, and if you study the Bible and you read through Chronicles, Hushai here, again, it makes it more clear that he was a friend to David, just like Jonathan was. And like I said, he had nothing to gain. You think about this. When he came to David, what if he was caught? David was on the run. So if he was to be caught, he would have been killed as a traitor. There would have been no chance for him whatsoever. And so, again, you go, what did David have to offer him at this point? You go, absolutely nothing. And that's one of the great beauties of what true friendship is, that there's nothing to gain and maybe everything to lose, by offering it. But that's, when I think about that, you go, gosh, isn't that what Jesus did for me? What did you and I have to offer Jesus for him to become our friend? And what did your friendship and my friendship cost him? Maybe that's even the deeper question. It cost him his life. Think about that. For Jesus to become my friend, he had to die. And he did it for me, and he did it for you. And so, there's so many things in Scripture, like I said, that you can study through this, and it'll really minister to you as you think about relationships, and whether it be betrayal or friendship, the relationship that you have with the Lord. And the neat thing is, remember, there's a friend that sticks closer than a brother that we have in Jesus. So you maybe tonight you went, I can't think of anybody. And you go, yes, you can. You can always think of one. You can always think of Jesus. Amen. But I guarantee if you think hard enough, that you'll find probably more than one. And then hopefully you can think of opportunities in your own life where either you've had the opportunity or maybe they're there right now and you just haven't taken advantage of it. And so tonight the Lord will just remind you that, wow, here's an opportunity to be Jesus with skin on for somebody. And you go, man, for such a time as this, and to be able to be that for somebody else, there really is no greater blessing. You think of when people die doing something for someone else, and people go, well, I wonder if that's what their life was for. Well, Jesus said, no greater love as any man than this, than a man would what? Lay down his life for his friend. Jesus said, for this reason I was born. He was born to die. If you think about it, he was born to die for the sins of the world. So that kind of sacrifice is not a negative thing. It's always a positive thing. So what we see, the opposite of that sacrifice is self-centeredness, and that's what we're finding here in 2 Samuel 16. It says, when David was a little past the top of the mountain, remember he's fleeing now from Absalom, it says there was Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, who met him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a skin of wine. You'll remember Ziba, we'll get to him, but back from chapter 9, it says, and the king said to Ziba, what do you mean to do with these? And so Ziba said, the donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who are faint in the wilderness to drink. And then the king said, where is your master's son? And Ziba said to the king, indeed, he is staying in Jerusalem. For he said, today the house of Israel restore the kingdom of my father. Remember, Saul was his father, to me. And he would have been the only heir, which he really wasn't an heir because he was crippled. He was disqualified, under their own law. And so Ziba here, he slanders Mephibosheth to David. And he says that he's in Jerusalem, believing that, that Absalom has really overthrown the kingdom so he could restore it back to Mephibosheth. So Ziba just makes this up. This isn't a true statement at all. And you go, why would Ziba say such a thing like this? And you have to, again, it doesn't take too much, but if you remember back to 2 Samuel chapter 9, remember David, he was king now over both the southern and the northern kingdoms. He's king over all of Israel now, and he's now thinking back. He's older in his life, and he's thinking there, God has been so good to me as he's sitting in his house, and he's going, is there anybody left remaining in Saul's house that I can show kindness to? You remember that? And everybody's going, let me see, everybody's dead. Oh yeah, he's got one son, Mephibosheth. And he goes, and Mephibosheth, but he's crippled. Remember, they were fleeing when Saul died because they thought, that everybody was going to get killed, and his nursemaid dropped him, and he's lame in both of his feet. And he lives out, basically he's living in the wilderness. I'm going to say, like, is anybody here from, no, I know that we have Taft people. Derby Acres. It'd be like Derby Acres. That's a safe place because they probably don't even have internet out there, so nobody's watching from there anyway. But you go, be like Derby Acres is where he's living at. And so, like, there's no risk, of anything, and then all of a sudden he gets word that, hey, David wants to have you come to his house. And he's shaking, and he says, who am I but a dead dog? He's thinking, man, I have no value or worth, and why would David want me to come to his house? And David says, because I want to show kindness to you for your father's sake, for Jonathan's sake. I want to bless you. I want to restore to you everything that belonged to Saul. And you think about this, and he's like, well, what belonged to him? You think of all the gold, all the silver, all the land, the orchards, the vineyards, the winter home, the summer home, the boats, the cars, if he had any. You think of all that says, whatever he had, he's going, I want to restore all these things to you. And he goes, and I want you, I'm going to adopt you as my own. You're going to eat at the king's table all the rest of the days of your life. He's blown away. So do you think then do you think Mephibosheth is wanting David to be overthrown? Not hardly. Now, remember, Jesus said the one who loves much is the one who's been forgiven much. And Mephibosheth shouldn't even be alive. And David spared his life. And so David had commissioned, do you remember this, Ziba and his 15 sons to take care of Mephibosheth and to care for all the land and all the stuff, make sure that the crops were planted and the crops were harvested. Mephibosheth couldn't help at all, but he was the benefactor. So I guess my question to me and you, because it's something we all have to consider when again, he's moved to Alabama. He was a guy who used to attend our church, Howard Eddy. He was a retired sheriff's officer, and he always used to have this saying, and he was great in our men's ministry because the guy was he wasn't a waffle at all. He was solid. When you talked to him, it was about the Word of God. He prayed, he exhorted, and he would be so good with guys because he would remind them of what it is to be a servant. He kind of reminded me of what Romaine was to Pastor Chuck, and he was just a really good friend. He said, he said, you'll know you're a servant by the way you respond when someone treats you like one. And it's so true because, people say, oh, I just want to serve in the church. Yeah, I just want to serve. And then you go, okay, I need you to do this thing. Who do you think you are telling me what to do? And I go, I thought you just asked you could help if there was anything you could do. Well, I didn't think you wanted me to do that. I thought you wanted me to come up in the front, and stand in front of the people and maybe, sing or, tell stories or do something, but you want me just to sweep or mop or, God forbid, plunge a toilet? Are you kidding me? No, I don't, and Howard was one of those guys that, if it needed to be done, he just did it. He didn't say anything, he just did it. And as soon as, because guys are real good about, complaining about something, and Howard, man, he'd get in your face real quick. And you didn't ever take it as he hated you or anything else. You knew that he loved you, but there was no wiggle room. He goes, because you give him an inch and what? They'll take a mile. And he'd know that. He'd go, hey, Mike, and the guy who always knows everything is not the guy that you want in leadership. He said, because people go to him because he listens. The guys that you want in leadership are the guys that don't listen. When a guy comes and starts whining, he goes, you cut him off the knees, or in his place, you pull out your 45 and you pop him in the knee. He's like, you got your policeman special or whatever. But he's like, no, you just don't do that. And David was surrounded. He had some mighty, mighty men, in his life. But I look at Ziba and you go, was he filled with resentment? You think maybe a little jealousy, over Mephibosheth? You think maybe bitterness or maybe all the above? So it says, and the king said to Ziba, here, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours. And Ziba said, I humbly bow before you that I may find favor in your sight, my lord, O king. Ziba, he was crafty. He was sneaky. This guy was a liar who only thought about himself. How he thought of that quick, that reveals what is it? The Bible says out of the abundance of what? The heart, the mouth speaks. I mean, that was in his heart. I mean, that just happened that fast. And you're going, man, I mean, this is dark. But what does David do? David reveals something that is not a quality. That, again, what does the Bible reveal about all of us? It's everything, warts and all, like we say. David responds in a way that he never should have responded. Proverbs 18:13 says, he who answers the matter before he hears it, it is a folly and a shame to him. He didn't hear from Mephibosheth. He just acted. And he's guilty of this. Proverbs 18:17 goes on. It says, the first one to plead his cause seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him. The testimony of one seems right, until another comes along. So again, here's David. He's presumptuous in this, and we can all fall to that. Even people that are after God's own heart, and so you go, be real careful with that. He says in verse 5, now when David came to Bahurim, there was a man from the family of the house of Saul whose name was Shimei, the son. I love this story, by the way. It just gets funny as it unfolds here. God just puts these things here, so follow along with this. He said, the son of Gera coming from there, and he came out cursing continuously as he came. He comes out throwing stones at David. I mean, he's joining in the revolt. I mean, he's on Absalom's side in this. I mean, again, I mean, he's a coward, but not too afraid to make his heart known. It says, and he throws stones at David and at all the servants of King David and all the people and all the mighty men who are on his right. Think about this, and all the mighty men. Like he's got, remember, his mighty men, that's another word for special forces, okay? This is the cream de la crop. These are the special ops guys. They're trained to kill, right? They're mercenaries, right? It says, and all the men who are on his right hand and on his left. Also, Shimei said, this is one guy, okay? Thus, when he cursed, come out, you bloodthirsty man, you rogue. He's saying this to David. It says, the one guy, okay, and you remember, David's traveling in throng here, okay? It says, the Lord has brought upon you all the blood of the house of Saul. He's saying, you killed Saul, okay? So that he's making that as an accusation. And we know that David didn't kill Saul, right? Every time David had the opportunity to kill Saul, what did he do? He said, I will not lay my hand upon the Lord's anointed. If God wants to take him out, that's up to God. So I'm not taking matters into my own hands. So this is a lie. It says, so in whose place you have reigned, and the Lord has delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom your son. So now you are caught in your own evil because you are a bloodthirsty man. So what Shimei is doing is he's calling on God here to destroy David. Okay, so that's his prayer here. He's wanting, and we know that when you start to do that, when you raise your hand against the Lord's anointed, what happens? It brings trouble with it. Exodus 22:28 says, you shall not revile God nor curse a ruler of your people. So God's kind of like, the boy in the bubble type of a protection. There's something you can't see it, but there's a protection there. And we'll see this even further as we get into this. And it's really sad though. Because obviously being in leadership, it's a difficult task. And so the Lord lets you, take a lot of dings, but there's a lot of things that he just shields you from, and there is a protection from the Lord. It says, then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog, and I love this, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Look what he said. He's so polite. Okay. He's a violent man, but he's a polite violent man. He said, please let me go over and take off his head. Don't you love that? I mean, you got to realize, so David, there's this crazy guy over here. This one guy. He is just irritating us to death. He's just walking along. He's yelling at us. He's blah, 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 blah. I'm tired of listening to the guy. Can I just go over there? I can get this over with just one good swipe of my sword, right neck high. This thing will be done. I can take care of it. Nothing more to be said. And it says, but the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? So let him curse, because the Lord has said to him, curse David. Who then shall say, why have you done so? So there's a part of David where he believes, actually, that he's being punished of God. It's not true, but there's something in it, because what happens when you're guilty of something and something happens, what's the first thing you think of? I deserved it. No, you know what? If you really think like that, you need to go all the way with it. You need to go, I should be dead. For the wages of sin is what? Death. Okay, I just shared on Sunday from Jeremiah 29:11. I know the thoughts I think towards you, says the Lord, right? Thoughts of, they're what? They're good, not evil. Okay, that's hard to, because have we given God enough ammo if he wanted to shoot us? I mean, we've given him boxes, right? And what does he do? He's going, what did Jesus say from the cross? Father, crucify them, right? What did he say? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And you go, that's what makes grace so amazing. So no, David, like me and you, David can be a man after God's own heart. You can, and I can be people after God's own heart. But guess what? A lot of times we get it wrong. God is not your enemy. And trust me, if you were his enemy, we wouldn't be here tonight. Okay? It's that simple. I mean, he doesn't even have to suck all the air out of the room. All he has to do is suck it out of your lungs. I mean, if you think about it, there can be plenty of air in the room and there's no air in your lungs. I mean, is God capable of that? And you go, that's how it works. That's an amazing thing. When someone dies, you go, it's not like the air went out of the room. It just went out of their lungs. It just stops. You go, wow, the breath of life. He could do it. It says, and David said to Abishai and all his servants, see how my son who came from my own body seeks my life, and how much more now may this Benjamite. Let him alone and let him curse, for so the Lord has ordered him. So David is saying, hey, you know what? If I don't even take out my own son for cursing me, why am I going to take out this stranger, this madman? It says, it may be that the Lord will look on my affliction and that the Lord will repay me with good for his cursing this day. And as David and his men, this is the funny part, went along the road, Shimei took the frontage road, went along the hillside opposite him and cursed him as he went, threw stones at him and kicked up the dust. It says, now the king and all the people who were with him became weary, so they refreshed themselves there. I mean, it's like he's just walking along. Here, eat this. Here's some dirt. You know, here you are. I mean, you have to picture that. You go, there's some humor in that. You go, and then he's picking up rocks and they're throwing. These are mighty men. I mean, this is like you're going, any one of those guys could just go poop. And it'd be like, you know, he's done. And he's like, and I mean, it shows you the strength of David as a leader, right? These guys, man, they do not take matters into their own hand. They don't go, well, you know, this is what I thought he would have wanted me to do. You know, there's that, my dad always used to tell me, two guys you never hire. The guy that will only do what you tell him to do, and the guy who only does what you tell him to do. And David's guys, they weren't like that. They're like, hey, if he didn't say it, we ain't doing it. You know what? We wait for the king's command. And you know what? And really, that's what we all need to learn how to do. Those who wait upon the Lord shall what? They shall renew their strength. And so what works in the world, it doesn't work for God necessarily. And so, again, that's why Jesus said, my kingdom's what? It's not of this world. So again, that thing of sometimes we think we're helping, you know, it's sin because it's pride, it's being presumptuous. It's like, you know, hey, I can make this choice, I can make this decision, you know, because there's an old saying that it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission. And so, you know, it's just one of those things. But David's men, I mean, man, they're spot on here. So the thing we have to think about, though, you know, with regard to slander here, you know, because it's going to happen if you ever try to do something good in anything, whether it's in your service to the Lord or just doing a good job at work or even in your neighborhood or any organization that you get involved with. Sometimes, you know, the best thing you can do is nothing other than to refresh yourself in the Lord, is just get away with God. You know, I mean, you pull the stinger out, let the Lord do it. Just, again, you know, life is hard. The life this side of heaven is hard. You know, people are going to harass you at times. They're going to, I mean, just watch what's going on in these political campaigns. I mean, man, there's probably never been a dirtier campaign on either side, you know, whether it's Democrat or Republican, than what's going on right now in our country. We're watching this, and it's like watching, you know, something made for TV, right? I mean, it's like a sitcom. I mean, you know, it's crazy. I mean, it's, you know, what do they say? Truth is stranger than fiction, right? And really, it's the case here. But David is doing what I really want to encourage you to do. When you reach these places where life is just miserable, and life at times is going to reach that point where it's miserable, is refresh yourself in the Lord and find a place where you can get away. You know, maybe you have a place already, but if you don't, you know, find a place. You know, that's part of the hunt, is, you know, finding that place where you can go, whether it's just sitting out and seeing something in God's creation, and where you can sit and you can't even hear the sound of the wind. It's just such a still place, and you can just get alone with God. You know, for some people that's in your home. We watched the movie War Room, and what an awesome movie that was, you know, to clear out a closet. I don't know any women in my life that would ever give up that much closet space. I mean, that was like, it wasn't even the fact they were going to, you believe the size of that closet? I mean, it was like, wow. I mean, you talk about dedicated, I mean, not that you wouldn't put the stuff in a different closet, that you would just, take a closet, but you could do that if that's all that you have. But, really, it's just finding that place where you could be completely alone with God, with no interruption. People, well, I do that in my car, and you go, that's like texting and driving. Yeah. You're going, I love you, Jesus. Hey, you idiot. It's like, man, Lord, sorry. The devil just tried to cut me off right there, and it's like, it doesn't, you can have good times with the Lord driving, trust me, you can do that, but that is not your quiet time place. There is nothing quiet. And take the train, and maybe you can do that, but that's about as good as it's going to get. But, one of the things I do want to encourage you with is the Lord, he really does draw close to the brokenhearted. And when you're going through those difficult things, God is not against you. He's working for you. Now, is it going to feel like it? No. You're going to go like David. You go, Lord, where are you? But that's what I love about, Psalm 3 as well. Because David begins to recognize, that, no, but I'll find my strength, in you, Lord. And you really can. And verse 15 goes on. It says, meanwhile, Absalom and all the people of the men of Israel came to Jerusalem. Ahithophel was with him. So it started off in Hebron. That's where he went to start his coup. Now he's come back to the capital there. And the sad thing is everybody involved here, they're united in bitterness, Absalom and Ahithophel. And sadly, again, like I said, they're going to pay the ultimate price. Bitterness, it's like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. And the sad thing is they're both going to die. Sorry to give it away, but that's where it goes. It says, and so it was when Hushai, the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. Now, he's not lying here. When he says long live the king, he's in his heart thinking of who? King David. He doesn't say King Absalom, okay? He just says long live the king. So Absalom said to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Why do you not go with your friend? And Hushai said to Absalom, no, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his I will be, and with him I will remain. What does he have? Hope. Hope that David is going to be restored. Furthermore, it says, whom I serve, should I not serve in the presence of his son, as I have served in your father's presence, so I will be in your presence. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, give counsel to us as to what we should do. So, Absalom has no idea, where to go. He's not a commander. He's not a leader. He's nothing in anywhere comparison to his father. And he doesn't even know what to do now that he's in control. And that's a real scary thing. It says, and Ahithophel said to Absalom, go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you have abhorred your father. Then the hands of all who are with you will be strong. So Ahithophel, remember, he when he gives counsel, it's as if the oracles of God. He gives counsel that's so profound, so deep, and you think about what he's doing here, the counsel that he's giving Absalom here. Ahithophel knows what he's about to counsel Absalom to do is a point of no return, not only for Absalom. There's no turning back. If he goes down this road, he'll never be reunited with his father, no matter what. This is the dagger, man. There's no hope for this, and nor for the men who will follow after him, because it's an allegiance issue here, and so that would be a point of treason and be a traitor here. So if they're going to go along with him, they know nobody can turn back from this. So he's telling him, and you got to think about this. Ahithophel here. Remember, and Ahithophel it's Bathsheba's grandfather, right? So he knows all about, the hatred, and that's what led to the bitterness, and his turning away from David was what? That he still resented the fact that, David had been with his granddaughter who was married to, his son-in-law, Uriah the Hittite. And so here he is now dead, and though, David made things right, it was never right in Ahithophel's heart towards David. And that's the thing about unforgiveness. If you don't forgive, you will be bitter. You can say, I'm trying. It's like I love, I listen to these debates and stuff, and I hear Donald Trump go, I don't forgive him. I'm thinking about it. No, you either do or you don't. I understand there's a process in healing. Yes, I get that, but it's a stated fact. It's like, hey, I forgive you. It's going to take me time to heal. What's the old expression? The wound will heal, but the scar is going to remain. There's a truth in that. But here he's telling them, rape these women, and all of Israel's going to know that, you don't have any respect for your father at all. And they'll know that, man, at this point, this is an offense that's so great, like I said, it cannot be repaired. And that the men that are standing with Absalom at this point, they got to go all in or all out. There's no middle ground in this. And so it demonstrates, for Ahithophel, as a counselor and advisor, how much he thought through things and understood, what would take place. But you have to understand what this is going to do is, because of this bitterness, Ahithophel, it's going to cause him to sin in a greater way than David sinned, if you think about it, with his granddaughter Bathsheba. Because now what's he telling him to do? He's saying, you go in and rape these 10 women. And you go, wait a second, that's 10 times worse than what David did. And David didn't rape Bathsheba. She was a willing participant in this. And ultimately she became his wife. So you go, do you see what bitterness does? It blinds us. Sin is blind. And many times when people, that old expression, the dog that's barking the loudest is the one who's getting hit with the stick. You think about, here's Ahithophel, and he's condemning, this in David's life, when he'll turn right around and go, hey, you know what? Here's what you need to do. And then you think, wait a second, Absalom. You go, well, why did he kill his brother Amnon? For raping his half-sister Tamar, right? And so he's gonna rape 10 women. And he killed his brother for raping one. And you go, man, is sin blind or what? And it's so easy that, why do you think Jesus said, get the log out of your own eye before you try to get the splinter out of your brother's eye? And usually the greater voice that we have with regard to the sin is to hide the sin that's dwelling within our own heart. That's something, to think about. Because usually, if we're really pushing against it really hard, and you'll have people go, man, why are you jumping all over him for that? It's like, man, give him some grace. Oh, no, and you go, and the next thing you know, they're doing the exact same thing. And you go, wow. I've seen it. I've been party to it in my own life. It's like you go, man, that's a dangerous place to be. It says, so they pitched a tent for Absalom on top of the house, and Absalom went to his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. It doesn't mean that they watched it. It was that it was there for them to see. It was celebrated. And again, when you think about this, wasn't this, to top it all off, wasn't this the very reason that Absalom turned against his father? It was because he felt like he didn't discipline his brother. And here he is doing the exact same thing 10 times over. He's just, it's ludicrous, as you think through this. And he does so much worse. It says, now the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was if it one had inquire at the oracle of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. Because, again, this is so sad, because Ahithophel had such a wonderful gift, but he let bitterness get into his heart. And I'll tell you what, if we do not root out the bitterness in our heart, we'll end up in the exact same place as the Ahithophels of life. Chapter 17, it says, moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, now let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise to pursue David tonight. It says, I will come upon him while he is weary and weak, and make him afraid, and all the people who are with him will flee, and I will strike only the king. Then I will bring back all the people to you when all return except the men whom you seek, and all the people will be at peace. And the saying pleased Absalom and all the elders of Israel. So he said, make a surprise attack, and David will be dead. His mighty men will have no reason to fight. There's no reason, then they'll be yours. Then Absalom said, now call Hushai the Archite also, and let him hear what he has to say. And remember, he's going for David to speak the opposite counsel as Ahithophel. It says, when Hushai came to Absalom, Absalom spoke to him, saying, Ahithophel has spoken in this manner. Shall we do as he says? If not, speak up. So Hushai said to Absalom, the advice that Ahithophel has given is not good at this time. For, said Hushai, you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are enraged in their minds like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field, and your father is a man of war, and will not camp with the people. Surely by now he is hidden in some pit or in some other place, and it will be, when some of them are overthrown at first, that whoever hears of it will say, this is the slaughter among the people who follow Absalom, and even he who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will melt completely. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men. So Hushai is not really exaggerating, too much here. He says, but what he's doing, he's trying to buy David time. He knows right at this point he could catch David off guard. It says, therefore I advise all that Israel be fully gathered to you from Dan to Beersheba. He's stalling here. Like the sand that is by the sea for the multitude, and that you go to the battle in person. So we will come upon him in some place where he may be found, and we will fall on him as the dew falls on the ground. And of him and all the men who are with him there shall not be left so much as one. Moreover, if he is withdrawn into the city, then all Israel shall bring ropes to that city, and we will pull it into the river until there is not one small stone found there. You go, good luck. Try pulling any city in Israel with a rope into a river. Pretty heavy. So Absalom and all of his men of Israel said, the advice of Hushai the Archite is better than the advice of Ahithophel. So watch what happens here. For the Lord has purposed to defeat good advice of Ahithophel to the intent that the Lord might bring disaster on Absalom. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar the priest, thus says Ahithophel advised Absalom and the elders of Israel, and so I have advised. Now therefore send quickly and tell David, saying, do not spend this night in the plains of the wilderness, but speedily cross over, lest the king and all the people who are with him be swallowed up. I mean, imagine, how difficult this was. This was pre, cell phone and internet. I mean, they literally had to run all over the land looking for him. I mean, they're like, is he over here? Is he over here? We have it so easy today. And these guys are doing it on foot. It says, now Jonathan and Ahimaaz stayed in Rogel, for they had dared not be seen coming into the city. So a female servant would come and tell them, and they would then go and tell King David. Nevertheless, a lad saw them and told Absalom, but both of the men went away quickly and came to the man's house in Bahurim and had a well in his court, and they went down into it. Then the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth and spread out ground grain on it, and then the thing was not known. And when Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house, they said, where is Ahimaaz and Jonathan? And the woman said to them, they have gone over the water brook. And when they had searched and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. Now it came to pass, after they had departed, they came up and out of the well and went and told King David, and said to David, arise and cross over the water quickly, for thus has Ahithophel advised against you. So David and all the people who were with him arose and crossed over the Jordan. By morning light, not one of them was left who had gone over the Jordan. Now when Ahithophel saw that his advice was not followed, he saddled a donkey and arose and went home to his house, to his city. Then he put his household in order, and then he hanged himself and died, and he was buried in his father's tomb. And you go, why? You go, he knew that his plan was good, but he knew that God was behind it. He knew somehow that God was working in this, because he knew that Hushai's plan wasn't a good plan, and how could this occur? And you go, and understanding this, he knew that somehow what was going to take place, that Absalom was going to be killed, because he was now going into battle. And he knew that David was the commander of the Lord's army, and that with his special ops guys, they would end up taking out, his own son. And with that, then what would happen? Well, then the king, David, would be restored back to power. What would happen to Ahithophel at that point? He would be seen as what? A traitor. And before anything else, he thought, well, I'll take my own life before I'm going to allow, the king to take my life. And it was the coward's way out. And matter of fact, it was very similar to what we see in the New Testament, right? Here's a friend of Jesus, who sits at the table with him as Jesus washes his feet. Judas Iscariot, and goes out and betrays his friend for 30 pieces of silver, and then he goes and repents, right? In the sense he throws the silver down, and then goes and what? Hangs himself. And you go, wow. Because remember, in the Old Testament, David is a type of Jesus when you look at David's life. So again, there's some similarities here. It says, then David went to Mahanaim. It says, and Absalom crossed over the Jordan, and he and all his men Israel with him. And Absalom made Amasa captain of the army instead of Joab. Then Amasa was the son of the man whose name was Jithra, the Israelite, and had gone to Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. So Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. Now it happened when David came to Mahanaim, that Shobai, the son of Nahash, from Rabbah, of the people of Ammon, Mashir, the son of Amiel, from Lodebar, the Barzillai, and the Gilead, from Roglaim, brought beds and basins and earthen vessels of wheat and barley and flour, parched grain and beans, lentils and parched seeds, honey and curds, and sheep and cheese of the herd for David and the people who were with him to eat. For they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. And so, we stop there tonight. I'll give you a few minutes, to get with one another. We'll take a moment here and pray. Obviously, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, right? So we obviously, in this, we're learning bitterness is a terrible thing. And if you're dealing with bitterness tonight in any relationship, you need to really pray about that, before you go. I love this saying, we're never more like Jesus than when we forgive, and we're never more like the devil when we don't. And if you're dealing with unforgiveness tonight, like I said, the best thing you can do is pray about that. Matthew 5:38 through 45, Jesus said, you've heard it was said, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person. For whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other cheek to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take away your tunic, let him have your cloak also. And whoever compels you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and from him who wants to borrow from you, do not turn away. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun, S-U-N, rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and the unjust. You know what? Hey, we were all at one time not walking with Jesus. And it was the kindness of God that led us to Christ. Amen? It wasn't the wrath of God. So, I don't know what the Lord has for you in that, but I just want to give you a few moments. We'll pray, and then if you need to go, go. If not, then, ask the Lord, hey, what's the takeaway for me tonight? You go, we've already thought of the people tonight, that needed to hear this and weren't here. So that we need to let go. Okay, now it's time to focus on us, okay? All right.